That's such a big number.
I get it.
Are they up again?
I asked.
Call this meeting to order, Stuart City Council, Stuart Municipal Utilities Board meeting, council chambers, tentative agenda, Monday, September 11, 2023, 5 p.m. I'll do the roll call on my guy. Kava. Dolly.
Here.
Morgan.
Here.
Renslow.
Here.
And I'll call the Stuart Municipal Utility Board to order. We'll start with roll call. Belden.
Here.
80. Craig.
Here.
And Shirley. Shirley's not here, and I'm here. So, have at it.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Kirkpatrick.
Second.
Second by Morgan. Ready to go, Kirkpatrick.
Yes.
Kava.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Morgan.
Yes.
Renslow.
And do I hear a motion to approve the agenda from the utility board?
I'll make motion. Second.
Moved and seconded, how do you vote? Craig?
Aye.
Brian?
Yep.
And I vote aye. Number 2?
Council Utility Board Finance Committee, Wambolt contribution.
All right, so the committee of Craig, Brian, Mike, and David has met a few times in June, July, August, and just here at 4 o'clock today to really talk about, the initial topic was the potential participation of the utilities board in the water cost of Housing Phase 4, otherwise kind of known as Wambolt, 3rd edition. There's information at your seats that reviews various scenarios that were reviewed. And this, I think we've gone over this a little bit before, but I'll briefly go over them. Scenario A reviews, I think everyone has this paper. don't they? Anyone not have it? So what this reviews is our various alternative approaches, assuming the utilities is willing to participate in some portion of the water cost of Housing Phase 4. Scenario A reflects that 100% of the loop cost that's out in the high school area would be funded by the water utility, and 1/3 of the water cost itself. Scenario B is 1/3 of the loop and 1/3 of the water cost, or effectively 1/3 of everything. Scenario C is 1/2 of everything. Then scenario D is 100% of all the water costs. So that gives you the clearest depiction as to what the total water cost is. Just because of how it's put together, scenario D is at the left side. That total water cost for everything is right at $405,000. And that includes the approximate $89,500 for the loop costs. So does anybody have anything you want to cover on the kind of the background costs?
These are total costs, right? And how long of a term are we talking about?
The water only, their total costs, yes.
How long of a
So-
term?
So that's on the flip side. What this is, there's some assumptions that we have to make, because the city is currently taking out short-term debt that matures in 2026, and that short-term debt will then be paid off by long-term debt in 2026. So the long-term debt is not yet in place. So we're just kind of laying this out as a planning tool to get information to you so you can review it. And then most likely the utility board could, if you chose to participate, have that included in your FY '25 budget. You could include it in FY '26. I think the sense of urgency was here just to get this laid out to the board and the council so that it's all laid out. The project is in the works, and then the utility board, it's up to the board, of course, to choose how you want to proceed and what your timing would be.
So these would be annual amounts.
And these are annual amounts. They're based on the city's long-term debt in 2026 being a 20-year debt. So effectively, it's divided over 20 years. So if you look at if you look at option 1, which is the most consistent with the prior cost participations that the utilities has participated in, that includes no interest expenses paid by the utilities. So if you look at option 1A, that's $10,000 per year. That's all of the loop cost and 1/3 of the rest of the water cost. Option 1B, scenario 1B, I should say, is $7,100 per year. That's 1/3 of everything. Scenario 1C is $10,500 per year. That's 1/2 of everything. And then 100% of everything over 20 years, no interest. That's roughly $1,800. That's scenario 1D. And then the scenarios at the right include the assumptions at the bottom are really important to know. And I hope folks have I think you've had this material a few times, so I hope you've had a chance to look at it. But the material in the right column, this includes an assumption of interest expense. It's an assumption at this point because the debt's not been issued on a long-term debt for this. So if you chose to include interest expense, this assumes an average rate of 5% in 2026. That would be the numbers shown in the second column under option 2. The same cost of participations that are noted along the left, but including interest that's the only distinction between the first column and the second column. So that's kind of the base background there, and happy to answer any questions you might have, or if Pat wants to add anything, or I think you all should have this information that was handed out a couple times. This shows some history and what the cost participation's been. Phase 1 included 1/3 of the water. This has been handed out before, so you may not have it at your places now. Long edition in 2013, that cost participation was 1/3. Phase 2 in 2017, that had no cost participation in the water. Phase 3, all saints, that had 40%, and then the current phase is an open question for the utility board, really.
So looking at number 8, the net income off of this, with a couple of adjusters in there for growth, was about 7,000. So either 1A or 1B is kind of, and I guess the rest of everybody jump in here wherever, but we kind of talked between those two items, and Ash was okay with either one of those being a discussion and making that a part of our budget planning in January.
Yes.
So this gives us now until then to look at it, and you can kind of incorporate how this works at that point.
And that decision will be made by the utility board. That's just FYI for the council members. Utility would be having some times to consider what the committee is proposing. 1A or 1B. So tonight we just we laid out all the information that we've been discussing with the committee.
And that 1B was what had been historically done, correct?
Yes. So any questions from the council? If not, that's something will be decided on with the utility board in the future.
I'm just glad we're able to get the information out there
Yes.
early, so people can take a look at it. That's the main thing.
Okay, you wanna move on to?
Thanks, Chip,
You bet. That's
and committee members, that's a lot of work. I appreciate that.
2B, the wind turbine, we discussed that with the committee, and that that agreement between the city and utility will be up next year. So there will be more discussion about it between the city and utility of how to renew the agreement. We just put it here.
I think effectively the current, am I correct, the current agreement goes forward.
Yes.
And I think there's been some questions about why does this, and I think some of the rationale is it's a power source, of course, for the city overall. But some of the rationale is where you have a municipal electric utility, that electric utility does not pay property taxes. So if you, for example, hypothetically, if you had Mid-American as your electric utility provider here, they would pay property taxes to the city. Some municipal utilities have a payment in lieu of taxes that's paid. And I think, and Pat, correct me if this is not right, but I think perhaps some of the rationale behind the agreement itself was to operate in somewhat of a fashion as a payment in lieu of taxes from the electric fund of the utilities to the city. Because the city doesn't receive property taxes from the electric infrastructure in town. If that's not accurate, please, let's hash that out and just get the correct information out there. But I think that's some of the rationale. And then other considerations are participation in salaries, participation in the cost of city hall, and so forth. I think you're well aware of how the funds flow from one entity to another. What those amounts are, I think Ash has those details.
Was that agreement established when we built the wind turbine?
Yes.
It was in 2004.
It causes a lot of confusions for new council members, new utility board members. You know, what the content is, the calculation to get that, why the payment's made. And to me, it can kind of cause animosity that shouldn't be there between the two entities. So get rid of that. And to me, if there's any viable reason to keep it, fine, but if there's not, but to me, it didn't make any sense to keep it. But I mean, we share other things in other ways that are, explainable. And to me, this one is, I don't know if I haven't had a good explanation as to why the city's involved or why, the utilities pay the city.
Well, part of the problem is the utilities cannot buy power. They have all power requirements contract with Citgo.
Okay.
And to get around that, they put this on the city and then we paid back the city for it. Way technically, we're not breaking that contract with Citgo. Now, that
That is
loophole.
very useful to know that. That's
That loophole, I think, has since been closed, but that's how they did it back then.
So maybe we need to see if it's even required now. If it closed then.
Well, we still have a contract with Citgo, but
We do, we still have our SIPCO contract. And they did redo the contract a little bit, but I think that language is still in there where we buy all of our power from SIPCO.
yeah, I think
They
that's,
don't like they don't like us buying power from somewhere else because they set up their budget assuming they're gonna get a certain amount of money from every town. Right. I wasn't here back then when all that was done, but that was how the city got involved with it.
And we'll be talking about it very soon to see if we're gonna renew that agreement or not. Will be with the budget session.
Well, if it gets paid off, we really don't need to renew the agreement. There you
well, I agree
Well, I
with
don't like
that
to
too.
use it.
I agree with that too, and,
We're done making payments in April, I don't know why we wouldn't have a reason to renew the agreement. Everything all the power that we would get off of that wind turbine then is, well, I hate to use the word free, but we're not paying anything for it. It's, for the first time in 20 years, we're not paying anything for that. we have other issues with the wind turbine. That's a little bit of money, but we do save quite a bit every year that we don't have to buy from Sitco. And Sitco is about 6 cents a megawatt or kilowatt, and however much power we can save and not have to buy from Sitco saves everybody a little bit.
They probably got a little nervous about that when we started talking about building a wind turbine too. Because they were generating power from somebody other than Citgo.
So if that, I know Brian has asked about, so if the utilities were to hypothetically construct additional turbines, meaning additional Stuart Utilities owned turbines, be balanced in light of the agreements with Citco,
It would,
if it's possible.
right,
Yeah, it would. You know, and I think the other thing we all need to remember here in talking about renewing an agreement is that most people would like to forget this, but the utility or the city does not pay a utility bill. All of the utilities supplied to the city are supplied free of charge. So that includes all the electrical power, all the water service, which includes things like the swimming pool. All those items are provided by the utility to the city. So there is a balance there.
And the city doesn't charge a utility property tax like we could if it was a different, like Mid-American, right? Well, we could charge them property tax, couldn't we?
It would have to be set up, I think, as a payment in lieu of taxes agreement,
Something.
But
like
there's,
that.
yeah, and so, the utilities pays the city for this building we're in, Womble contributions, so
It's a back
it's a
and
mix of
forth.
marriage, that was the whole point of this.
It's not just we're getting something for free,
Right.
the utilities just getting something out of it too.
Yeah, so I guess,
Basically.
Changes.
so to me, I think we're at an inflection point of, the people that put in like the Rose Acres planning to grow our water, revenue. And we missed out on the ethanol plant, both on the city and on the utility side. If that was even possible, I don't know. They made that possible in Iowa Falls for the city. They went out and annexed the thing and it's worked out great. That's the biggest pain you guys have with infrastructure. It's not an option now. So, I just think we're at a point to try to consider some additional revenue sources, and that's been brought up. We talked some of that, but I don't know if anybody wants to do that or not. We've met 3 times as a group and,
It might be helpful to bring everybody up to speed on it, really.
well, yeah, so we talked about additional, wind turbines, we talked about, what else? Shovel-ready sites, cameras, you guys are looking at, and what else? Different
If it's
utilities,
feasible to do a gas utility.
yeah. So is that something that anybody wants to study or not? Because we don't need to meet anymore if nobody wants to, and if we do, we can, refer that to people that can give us opinions on whether those things are feasible. But I'm telling you, looking at, to me, our funds are at a point where they're gonna have to be raised, on the utility side. The water and electric, we don't have any levers to pull on other than that. And water rates are gonna have to go up, electric rates are gonna have to go up. And that's, there's no incremental revenue for that. It's just a cost. And so that's why we were trying to look at additional things. So, I don't know if you wanna add anything else to that, but that's kind of, I don't like raising rates, I hate raising rates, it drives me nuts completely, I hate it. So that's the whole reason that
So kind of piggybacking off of what Chip said, if the utility board were to expand,
Mhm.
what is the maintenance side of having the wind turbine? I mean, is it pretty expensive or is it kind of minimal?
Oh, on the maintenance side of the wind turbine, this one out here, we have a contract with us, it's about 13,000 a year. And you can we have years where we don't have any trouble with that thing, and then we have years where you can probably, basically, average probably on a year's time, we probably spend anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 on that, just
Just maintenance,
just
in general?
maintenance, yeah.
I think the other thing we need to remind ourselves is that the longevity of that is about 25 years, and it's been there about 20 now. So at some point, we need to, we'll need to look very closely at if we're gonna continue to operate that thing, what's it gonna cost us to do that? After its average life is about 25 years, and we're getting close to that. So I guess you maintain it as long as you can, but it can, again, cost you more to maintain it than it's worth. So I'd be willing, and I've said this before, that I'd be willing to sell the city of Stuart our wind turbine if you wanna buy it. So, but that's something we're gonna have to look at down the road, is there's not too many more years of usage out of that wind turbine, so.
But I would agree to your point, Brian, that looking at other alternatives to generate revenue would be a good idea rather than a bad idea, because if you don't, you just rely on rate. You gotta try to figure something out. At least you're showing to the people that you're responsible to and answer to that you're doing something. You may get an answer that says, yeah, I really don't want to do that, but at least you looked into it.
Right.
That's the main thing. If you never look into it, you just say, well, we'll just continually raise rates. That's, in my view, not real responsibility. You gotta take a look at it, so. Whatever, if we need somebody to look in, the possibility of the gas utility, why not? What could they say? No, you don't want to do that. Okay, yeah, you're gonna be out a little money probably to hire somebody to do that, but at least you've done your due diligence. And you put it out there and you said, hey, at least we're trying something. Maybe they come back with a different idea and say, hey, we could probably do this. I don't know.
If we look at gas utility, what does that do with our agreement with Mid-American that we currently, didn't we just do something with sale, with the
Yeah,
tax?
because it was a franchise fee.
Yeah.
So that's what they get instead of the gas utility. So, but I mean, the initial feedback, I looked for an expert in this area, and Chip actually knows the guy. And so if this was something that the council and the board wanted to do collectively, as the next step, you refer these items to them, they come back, give you a written opinion on it, and they tell you whether they're feasible or not, time frame, and you cut him and Ash loose, and you tell them to figure it out, which ones work or possibly don't work, and that's it. And, if you wanna do it, fine, if you don't, but there's no sense in us meeting anymore if we're not gonna do that, because that's kind of we're just trying to look for additional ways, and like I said, my whole thing is, these funds that the utilities has are, they're at a point where the rates are gonna have to go up. Continuing to do that year after year is a struggle, so,
Takes it out of our hands, sitting up here trying to speculate on, oh, this would work, this wouldn't work, kind of get an expert's opinion.
To me, it's our job as appointed and elected officials to try to promote, different ways of doing things to reduce costs for our citizens, taxpayers, utility customers, who are all the same people.
And how much does it,
No idea.
you have no idea?
You'd have to get that, you'd have to get an agreement with, his name's Tim Whipple, you have to get an agreement, he does studies, he's got a letter or an engagement with the utilities, we have to do the same thing with the city. And then you'd have to turn them loose with Chip to figure out what that would cost, and then the council and utility board have to agree to do that. And go slowly with it, but at least it would, be options for us to control more of our own house versus jacking rates on everybody's, because everybody's passing nuts. I mean, literally, you have no choice on the water side of things. Xenia blames the one water works, we blame Xenia, it's just and it is what it is. So when we get an increase, it's just because someone else is passing it down, and so it's just trying to find additional revenue sources to offset that, so we don't have to do that anymore. And the city's just got different revenue sources to do that, the utility doesn't.
So we would just have to have Ash reach out to them.
Yeah, and you give them the items you want to look at, and ask them out, what the ballpark cost would be for that, and,
I mean, it's not a bad idea, at least we're trying.
I think that's the big point Brian's trying to say too, is If it's something like, we don't even wanna do it, then
Right.
it's pointless to keep meeting.
Correct.
But if it's something that we wanna maybe go down that path, then I think the next step would be just to get a price before we go anywhere from there.
Is that something you can do, Ash?
Oh, yeah.
Does the utility board want to do that? I mean, to me, it's not just one thing, it's the list that we came up with and anything else that they could come up with, right?
I think you gotta look at it. I would also remind you that when you do that, if you do that, you're gonna have additional expense, mainly in employment. You're gonna have to hire people to handle that kind of a job. So, I mean, there's pros and cons.
Yeah, and
And
Chip's talking,
the other thing I would say, age of our gas utility, what's the age of our infrastructure for gas?
based on the initial discussion with this guy, I think he's gonna, if we gave him, the four things we discussed were wind turbines, is it feasible, are they more efficient to build new ones now? I don't know. Shovel-ready site, these speed cameras doing a 2080 with the city and utilities, where the utilities maintain some of the electric and the pole infrastructure work. And so there would be revenue sharing in that concept and this gas utilities. And if none of them are feasible, none of them are feasible, but at least you looked. And the gas utility, this guy was not very positive on, I'll just tell you. I mean, he was not, because of
Yeah, I've talked to other utility managers, within Symeca, and they've not had a good experience with gas utility.
but at least we asked.
At least we asked, and I
And we
agree.
went to a guy that can put it feasible, and if it's too much, then he'll tell you no.
But at
Yeah, I
least
think
we
you
tried.
got-
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
we're trying, we're doing something.
So if someone tells you your water and electric rate went up, you tell them you looked at 17 other different options to try to bring in additional revenue. And the utility board and the council are working together to try to, provide the best value.
But it doesn't hurt to reach out to talk to him to see what his fees are, what it's gonna entail.
And you're kind of the one that fits that background the best. Zeri.
So you wanna do that call for study, kind of thing?
Just see what the cost is, but I don't want to ask him if you think the gas utility is feasible. To me, it makes sense to ask him about all of those things, what it would cost to give us an opinion on, if there are options for us to.
He knows other cities.
Huh?
He knows other
Oh,
cities that are in the same
that's what
position
this
we are,
guy
so.
does. He
He
used
might
to be
have
general
other-
counsel for Mid-America. I mean, yeah, I mean, this guy's a, he's a good guy.
I'm gonna ask Ash and Pat, in your estimation, is the wind turbine been plus or minus for revenue for the utility?
We've made more off of it than we've lost, by far.
So I mean, that's being able to quantify that, that's huge.
And it's 20 years old. If we had a newer version of it, it would be even more.
Well, it'd be bigger too.
It's a very small unit compared to most of them.
Well, alls I remember, and I see this only because that's what he told me, but he was coming back here for his 10th reunion. And they were just erecting the wind turbine. He said, "What are you building there, Dad?" And he said, "Well, they're gonna put up a wind turbine." This was before I was on the utility board. But he said, "If they're doing that," he said, "build all you can." He said, "Because," he said, "if you can build another one, build another one." He said,
Right.
"Because the main advantage of wind power is that you can now store that energy in an energy cell and you can sell it. And it's not just something you consume, as the wind turbine goes around, you consume that energy. You can actually store that energy now. So,
And there's tax credits available.
Why couldn't the city do it? I mean, it gets you around your SIPCO contract. If the city's doing it, not the
The city
utilities.
does what? The wind turbines or all
Yeah,
of it?
the wind
I
turbine.
don't care how
No,
it
I'm
gets
just saying,
done.
but,
I wanna cut rates in half.
And
I don't care how we get there.
This would be something we ask him probably.
yeah, we asked him, the city does it versus the utilities, it gets you around that selling or buying power from somebody else.
What's that?
I said, if the city does it instead of the utilities, it gets you around that piece of the contract with SIPCO.
But he was talking about that it may not even exist anymore. This guy would know this probably off the top of his head.
That's why
But, yeah, I mean, you asked him.
So we wanna ask him about his fees first.
Yeah, but not just one thing, you know, those 4 things, I can email them to you if you want, or tip
Yes.
can, whatever. And then if there's other ones that people come up with, you know, ask them to size them, how much it would cost to understand whether these are feasible. Maybe the wind turbines come back and the gas thing goes away and the, I don't know, whatever. Let him tell us.
Send me the.
Yeah, well, yeah,
I agree with that. If you, even if you spend money to answer the questions you have, and none of it's feasible, it's still money well spent.
right. Put it in paper, you know, we're trying. Right after the rates go up, you can say we tried. you know?
That's good, that's, email me, you call me,
Yeah.
we'll get hold of him and.
But I think that, I mean, this guy's not cheap, so I mean, you know, I don't know how this gets split up by subject or what, but I mean, it's gonna, you're gonna have to
Find
recommend,
out.
you're gonna have to recommend that, how those costs get assigned,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Okay, if that is a mutual agreement, we'll get hold of,
And he knows him, so I mean, maybe the 2 of you do that.
yeah, I will,
Okay.
So what happens to this subgroup? Do we need to continue to meet or no longer? I don't. Because you're gonna come back with these fees, so what are our next steps logically? Because to me, I think, you know, with this legality, or getting one of that
Do
background.
you feel it necessary to meet anymore?
I do, so we don't lose traction on what we're trying to do,
Right.
but to me, I think she needs to be on this because of what she does professionally, would have a good skill set to offer to this committee that I don't have, frankly. So,
Well,
what I get at is you only have 4 people on a committee, so.
yeah, and you don't have 3 council members.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, you can have 2 and 2, so I don't know if the people
So
change.
it doesn't matter to me who it is, but, and maybe you wanna wait until after we get some more answers from this
That's fine.
consultant.
Yeah,
I would
see
say
it change.
And meet at that point.
we're just going from a math thing that I enjoy. I don't like legal stuff. So, you know,
It's not that bad.
that's fine, I just don't like it, so. I mean,
we'll get the information and then we'll take from there.
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll go on to soccer complex improvements. We had a whole list of things for the soccer complex, August 30th, 2022. And one of them was the lighting. For approximately 5 years, the soccer club has requested lighting. I had a welder fix our old poles that we took down, so we have an arm on both sides. Pat says he has the lights, and I know it's a time frame between different utilities, whenever. We've got the estimated cost for the wiring and everything else, but I don't know. Probably won't happen this year, will it, Jim?
Late fall,
Like fall like that. Okay.
and next thing is
The
placement,
biggest thing is to decide where you want
yeah, placement.
Can somebody just print out a map and start putting X's down?
Biggest thing is keeping them as close to the current power supply as you can.
No, I mean, I get that, but can somebody just print a map and start putting X's where they should go? I mean, I don't,
Probably
it seems
Dustin,
like this topic's been going on way longer than it should.
probably Dustin and I can meet, come up with something that makes sense.
Yeah, and
So
then it
instead
can,
of one arm, will be arm on each side.
I don't care what they look like, as
We
long as
know
they
what
go
the-
up and it just
You know what the
continues.
power.
Yeah, is
No,
that
I'm
something we
sorry to talk
even
about
need to get involved with, is placement, or? I don't think we would even
Jim and Dusty can
care,
figure it out.
yeah.
And then, timeline on the grading for the old shot put area for soccer, I mean, was,
That was John Schwinger's project, not mine.
oh, he was gonna get hold of it.
He was gonna talk to Rusty Snyder. I know there's some drain tile issues that they need to look at to address, but
Okay. And then can the Ben or the utilities look possibly if the water lines broke to the old restrooms or not? Because Tim Young, we got money set aside to fix the old restrooms, and first thing we have to do, make sure the water line's still working.
the sewer line would be just as important.
Sewer line too, okay. And then are you in agreement, since the whole sports complex that eventually tearing the old building clear to the east down?
Yeah.
I cleaned it completely out, and I
Yeah.
set a couple fire hoses.
We'll make it go away.
Does anybody else have any on the I mean, we've got the raw, the bathrooms, lights, electricity, we've got sign, drinking fountain, I guess one thing we never did get.
I'll have Kyle make some.
Tile make. Other than that, I don't have any, but we had 150,000 designated, we used 3,000 and some for stump removal. Klein did an excellent job putting you that out there, James didn't do it, except the trees. Any other discussion?
Who takes care of that flag? I mean, if we're gonna talk about the soccer complex, who takes care of the flag? Because it's ragged and
Yeah.
tattered and looks like crap.
You mean the
Parker just called me yesterday on it, and so I said, well, when I get a flag at City Hall, we'll get one changed, but I don't know if we even have one in inventory, so.
Okay, so can we order one? If it's our job to take care of that flag, it looks really bad. And if we're gonna have games coming up, I don't want that. I mean, that's
Is
just,
there even a light on it?
I don't know. I don't even know who put it up.
There's supposed to be.
This is at the Wolf.
But I'll tell you, I was tempted to go buy a flag myself and put one up because it looks that bad.
Yeah, if you're gonna have a flag out there all the time, you gotta have a light.
Yeah, you gotta have a light on it at night.
There's a light on it. Okay, moving on then, traffic enforcement cameras.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm a traffic engineer at Iowa DOT. I'm based in Council Bluffs. I cover District 4, which is also where Corey works. And in the process of this is how I learned that Corey was on city council. So that was cool to get your coworkers a little bit better. So he asked me to prepare a short briefing about automated speed enforcement. I hear that I might be considering it for I-80 on the bridge over the interstate. So I'll give, pros and cons, impartial, neutral, and I'll explain why. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions, and if I'm gonna talk about it later, I'll just tell you that, I'll get to it.
Was Chief Rehawk planning on attending?
I bet you, I don't know.
The traffic study still hasn't been done yet, so
Okay.
he's still waiting on that, and then he'll provide an update.
So automated speed enforcement is one type of a thing called automated traffic enforcement. That's what we call this in Iowa, in our code and DOT talk. We call it automated traffic enforcement. We have two types. We have automated red light running enforcement, which if you've been to Council Bluffs, for example, that's a picture in Council Bluffs. If you go through an intersection, there's a big bright flash and you'll get something in the mail. So that's one type, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about automated speed enforcement. So that photo shows a typical installation where it's cameras and radar units mounted on, this is a overhead sign truss. Your installation would be maybe off of the bridge or something like that. So automated traffic enforcement is the generic term for these two different systems. So kind of a quick background evolution in Iowa. About 10 years ago, the city of Cedar Rapids had installed 4 sites on I-380 in their jurisdiction. And that basically started conversation and discussions at the state house level, at the local government level, and Iowa DOT was given the task to create rules about automated traffic enforcement. So in 2013, the DOT authored Iowa Administrative Code, Chapter 144. Real quick difference, so Iowa Code is the laws that are passed by the legislature, signed by the governor. Iowa Administrative Code are the rules and regulations that are developed by the state agencies to carry out Iowa Code. So this was Iowa Administrative Code is what DOT authored in 2013. So some of the requirements were that the cities and counties wanting to do automated speed enforcement would need to demonstrate that they've tried other engineering or enforcement solutions before going to automated speed enforcement. They need to provide an annual report to the DOT demonstrating the effectiveness, and the DOT would then validate whether or not these devices were effective and possibly recommend for removal. The first year that this was in effect, about 20% of the installations were recommended for removal. So that kicked off a lawsuit by the Des Moines, Muscatine, and Cedar Rapids versus Iowa DOT. Went through the lower courts, eventually reached the Iowa Supreme Court. There's a case number if you want to look it up. Basically, the cities won 6-0, and the rules in Iowa Administrative Code, Chapter 144, were immediately rescinded. So what that means is there's no state laws about automated traffic enforcement. But Iowa DOT has, in our traffic and safety manual, we have this one section which is basically guidelines of how to do a legal deployment of automated traffic enforcement in terms of the signs that you need and the thing and the kind of signs and safety kind of aspects of it. So the DOT can't approve or deny automated traffic enforcement, but we will help you in the terms of this document to get the installation accomplished. However, there have been recurring legislative attempts by all kinds of state senators and representatives to limit automated traffic enforcement, either banning it altogether or requiring the companies that do it to be incorporated in Iowa. There's a bunch of companies, and I'll talk more about this in a little bit. There's a bunch of companies that do this. None of them are based in Iowa. The biggest one, called Census Gatsos, is a large multinational corporation that's headquartered in Sweden. So not Iowa, not even necessarily United States doing this kind of stuff. So bringing my side of thing, what I look at as a traffic engineer is automated traffic enforcement is a solution. So what's the problem that we're going to solve with automated traffic enforcement? So the two sources of data that I look at the very first time I'm looking at anything is crash data and speed data. This is how we can see if there is a speed problem that would be best solved by something like automated speed enforcement. So we have all of our crash data going back to 2013 on our website on ICAT, Iowa Crash Analysis Tool is what ICAT is. This is just a screenshot of it. So I've selected, it's hard to see on the big screen, but you can see it on the little screens. That light blue box is all of the crashes along I-80 inside Stuart city limits. Going back to 2018, I just did the last full 5 years of data. So we have 43 crashes on this stretch of I-80. And what I was looking for real quick was crashes that could have been influenced by speed. So looking for causes of like driving too fast for conditions or follow too closely. So of these 43 crashes, 29 were single vehicle crashes, which more often than not, a single vehicle crash is caused by somebody falling asleep. But of the 29 crashes, one of them was listed as driving too fast for conditions. The remaining 14 crashes were multi-vehicle crashes. One of those was driving too fast for conditions, and 3 were followed too closely. So when I look at this, I see 3 crashes, and 5 of them may have been influenced by speed. So that's the actual crashes that have happened. We also have this analysis tool called the potential for crash reduction, PCR. So I'm happy to get into the nerdy statistical stuff, but I don't think we need to. Basically, the takeaway is I-80 through Stuart city limits is green, which means that there's a low potential for crash reduction because the crashes are low in comparison to the other segments of I-80. And then looking at the 2 ramp intersections, they're also green. Again, it's hard to see on that big screen, but all of the dots you see and all of the lines you see are green. Here's our ranking, the statistical value of high, medium, and negligible. Negligible is green, which means it's pretty much as safe as it can be. The crashes that are happening are just kind of related to the background clutter that there's not pointing to any specific solution is needed. So that's crash data. The other data I look at is speed data, and the Iowa DOT, and thank you to everyone who pumps gas in Iowa and funds Iowa DOT. We can afford this this software package called INRIX. It uses probe data So every car that has an info screen with a data connection, every cell phone that somebody has in their pocket in a car is broadcasting your speed and position to a bunch of companies. You know, when it says, please read the terms of this agreement, and you scroll down and hit accept, that's what some of the stuff you're saying is okay for companies to grab your speed and position data. INRIX is a company that grabs all of those people's speed and position data from all of those companies that you say yes to, and make it available to transportation agencies. So again, looked at the segments of I-80 in Stuart city limits, and what you're looking at is jumbled, but I promise I can explain it pretty well. So I'm looking for my mouse. So on the left side is the westbound, so traffic is flowing kind of like bottom or top to bottom. On the right side is I-80 eastbound, so traffic is flowing bottom to top. So that's kind of the two sides you're looking at. So going across each diagram left to right, that's midnight all the way back around to midnight. So we're looking at full 24 hours worth of data here. And then what I looked at, this is the 1 hour average for all of 2022 combined. So this little orange segment here is, I'm trying to see, this would be like 3 to 4 a.m., on January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd, the whole year, all add up, average out to be one number here. And last thing to show is these color bars, which tell you what these speeds are on this heat map. So I set the highest color bar to 81 miles an hour. Most places that do automated speed enforcement typically don't kick out a ticket until you're going 11 over the posted speed. So that's why I selected 81. So that dark green, you can see there is no dark green. Most of it is light green, which means it's 70, posted speed 70 to 81. So they're still speeding, but would not typically get a ticket from automated speed enforcement. And then that yellow you see is 65 to 70, and then on down. So all of 2022 looks pretty good. I think the highest average speed was around like 74 miles an hour. Again, this is very, very large data set, hundreds of thousands of points of data. So it kind of gets all smoothed out when you do average all of that together. But to go to a smaller sample size, I just looked at yesterday, 24 hours from Sunday, September 10th, midnight to midnight this morning. And you can see that it's mostly light green. We lost all of the orange, all the yellow. It's mostly light green. And then the highest speed I saw, this is just a screenshot. If I was doing it live, it'll show you the speed. I think the highest was average, 1 hour average speed was like 76 miles an hour. So that is speeding, absolutely. But it still would not typically be issued a citation under automated speed enforcement. So if you're serious about this and you want to move forward, the next step would be to pass a resolution that Stuart wants to do automated speed enforcement. At which point, if you already haven't, at that point, you'll get a veritable parade of salespeople giving you all kinds of demos and offering very lucrative proposals. Everything's going to be a turnkey solution where all of the city has to do is sign, and then cash will just flow in. I absolutely will not try to deny or downplay that the city could make a huge amount of cash doing this. However, and it depends on the company, they're all a little different. Usually they kind of start off that the city gets 60% and the company gets 40%. And then like 30, 60, 90 days of no payment, the longer it goes, the more money the company gets. So maybe if somebody pays after like 3 months, the city might get 20% of that. And then typically that 60-40 is what they give you right out of the gate. And then the longer you have it, the more money the company makes instead of the city. So the devil's going to be in the details on whatever kind of contract that you sign. But if you decide to do it, then you'll work with Iowa DOT, me specifically, Todd Frank, our district traffic tech, whom Cora knows really well. We will help you get through this section It's just a few paragraphs of what you would need to do under that traffic and safety manual, 8A. But then you have to be prepared for the backlash, because there's going to be a huge amount of backlash. I know I said I would be neutral and impartial, but kind of towing that line, you'll make a lot of money, but you'll be getting a lot of backlash. I guess that is neutral, because that's what's gonna happen. It would be neutral if I would say, we'd sell out for it. But maybe kind of think of it that way, because there's gonna be a huge amount of backlash. Here are just some screenshots of various headlines about it. The top, Prairie City, they're making millions of dollars and getting all kinds of publicity. This will really stretch the mantra that there's no such thing as bad publicity, because you're gonna get bad publicity. You're gonna get nasty emails, nasty phone calls. The DOT gets at least 1,000 a year, and we say you need to call city of whatever. On a personal note, I have a friend that works at Potawatomi County Clerk of Court in Council Bluffs. City Council Bluffs has several red light running cameras, and she says every morning there's a line of people out the door ready to come in and argue their red light running ticket, which has nothing to do with Potawatomi County. And the city says, just go to that website that's on that thing you got in the mail. So the cities don't really have anything to do with it, other than just allowing these third-party companies to install this stuff. So Prairie City is dealing with some backlash. This article even says, they quote, we all know that kind of the man on the street thing isn't the be all and end all, but it's a good indicator of how people are thinking. But one line that stuck out in this article about Prairie City, since their speed enforcement tickets, the income greatly outweighs their property tax incomes. So people are questioning why they even have property tax anymore in Prairie City, because the speeding ticket should be covering it all. LeClaire is probably the best example of bad publicity. It's a small town on I-80 on the Mississippi River, and you can see right here, they made over $6 million in 10 months. And
My son lives in Davenport.
has he got one of these in the mail?
No, he hasn't. I'm not sure how that's not happened. But he told me we went down to Chicago for a ball game, we were coming back, and of course you have to cross the Mississippi.
Yeah.
Look at that damn thing, Dan.
Yeah.
And there was a camera, within 50 feet of getting the other side of the bridge.
Yep.
And LeClaire was, and he said, you can't imagine the people who get caught with that thing.
Right.
And I guess my point there would be, if you're trying to trick them, yeah, you can do that, and you can make this kind of money.
Sure.
But if you give them enough notice, and if you make it clear that you're gonna go through it.
And that's part of the requirements that the DOT has, is that there's signing that says speed enforced by camera.
There's no sign in that one in LeClaire when you come across the bridge.
It's probably an conveniently inconvenient.
Yeah. It's there.
Yeah. So these are city infractions. These go on your driving record. They're not a moving violation. They don't go to your insurance company. This article dug into, do you even have to pay it at all? What's the downside of not paying it? And this reporter dug down, interviewed police chiefs and sheriffs, and basically found out the farthest they can take it is the city can file a lien on your motor vehicle registration. So the next time you go to renew your vehicle registration, you'll have to pay your $75, $80 fine or whatever. However, the cost to file the lien and track all that down, I'm not sure that these third-party companies would ever even go to that length. So there's plenty of websites and forums that say, don't even pay these. Nothing will happen to you if you don't pay these. Other kinds of backlash is, word gets out where these cameras are and people will route around them. That's what happened in Windsor Heights, a Des Moines suburb. They had some speed cameras on Interstate 235 that got a lot of people, and citizens and business owners were complaining that people were not driving through certain parts of town because of this, so they took their cameras down in early 2020 because of that. And here's some more headlines about the recurring state house level attempts to end or greatly limit automated traffic enforcement. So that was what I have for you. I'm absolutely happy to answer any questions you have on automated traffic enforcement.
Is there anything in the State House now, Austin, that they're trying to eliminate this, or is everybody just kind of neutral there in the State House for right now?
No, there's a group, I think it's 4 senators who they will always introduce a bill to limit this. And the last time, it's never made it out of committee. I don't think it's made it for a vote. But the last time they tried it, one of the things they added into it, I mentioned earlier, was that it would require the companies that run them to be incorporated in Iowa. And some of the cities and their lobbyists were crying foul on that because it, they pointed to some clauses about limiting interstate commerce kind of thing. But it frequently comes up every session.
Interesting.
Yes.
On your police reports for the accidents
Yeah.
in our city, how accurate, I mean, if the officer doesn't know, so how accurate are those? Because a lot of those accidents.
They're as accurate as the officer fills out the form. And if the officers don't fill out a crash report form and send it to the DOT, that won't be in our records.
Because you can't just assume. The officer can't
Sure.
assume that, and I only ask because I hear a lot of our departments, our fire and our rescue are out there all the time. So, they can tell I think they can tell what happens, but if the officer doesn't know specifically, he can't report that this crash was because of this.
Right. And
So I was just
and all of the crashes, thankfully, none of them have been fatalities, none of those 43. So they're not gonna be measuring skid marks and figuring out how fast cars are going. That's just not gonna be part of it. They're not gonna do an investigation unless there's a fatality, basically.
Good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking the same thing. You don't know for sure.
Yeah.
maybe
So
that's-
I talked about the average speeds, we make decisions on trends in the data, not the outliers. So of course, there's guys in Corvettes or Kawasaki Ninjas that'll go miles an hour. I'm not trying to say that's not happening, but looking at the trends of the data, I don't see any evidence of the speeding problem. Any last questions?
I appreciate your information, especially on the part about cell phones, because mine's going to tinfoil now.
Hey,
Nobody needs to know how fast I'm going.
if it's on, they're getting your.
It's going off.
Thanks, Austin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, 5 potential certified site plan.
That was me.
Oh,
And I apologize, we had a death in the family, so I wasn't able to get information out. But it was really just an open talking point, to maybe open up discussion between utilities and the city, about these certified site plans. We had this lady from Bondurant, what's her name?
Marquita.
There you go.
Yes.
She came out and she did some training for us, and they've gotten some pretty big companies come in. And so kind of just fishing around with Matt and talking about it, it has come to my attention that Brenda has done a huge amount of work already on this, and to a point where we think that maybe we could form a committee and start looking at this. So I don't know what the appetite is to looking at one of these. But I'd like to come up with a subcommittee, if everybody's agreeable, and kind of start talking about what our next steps is to get this moving forward. You wanna add anything, Matt?
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback off what she's saying there, it'd be nice to have a subcommittee put together to analyze sites, potential locations. I do believe the city of Stuart's missing out on many big potential opportunities with the certified site plan. Bondurant, again, as an example, before they even had their first certified site plan done, they ended up getting Amazon. Now, when I mention Amazon, though, I want to take the time to say that we don't have to have an Amazon. Some people are against that. Community that presented it, their site plan was finished.
And I think, on that, it's a good idea, because then the utilities participate in that along with the city council. What's the operation?
Yeah.
Let's test it out.
So there's a timeline when you start to do this, and to be able to put in an application is until June 30th of next year.
Okay.
So we would have plenty of time to look at it. You have to take steps. There's different site requirements, like a large site is 250 to 499 acres. Just a general site's 50 to 249. And then there's a bunch of stuff that you have to do. You have to do all these, what are they called? The phase, like where you do these studies.
Yeah, studies.
So you have to have a ton of studies done, to make sure that everything's good. There's a ton of stuff here. But like I said, we're kind of looking for a subcommittee, maybe a couple people from council, a couple people from utilities, Matt Funk, maybe a couple people from Seed, obviously Jim, and just to kind of start working on this to present to see if we can go anywhere.
Because those studies would obviously cost something, right?
Yes.
So, okay. Yeah.
But you could get Chip involved to see,
Sure.
how to offset these costs,
Exactly.
work all that.
That's one of those items that this group had discussed to send to this
This would, yeah.
municipal attorney to get his opinions on, so.
But most of the base work for this that has already been done. I mean, like I said, Brenda has done a huge amount of work. So I think we're at the point now that we can take it, help her, and kind of, but you have over a year to get it done.
Is a logical next step, a simple conference call with Tim. And I would be willing to do this for the utilities if that's okay. And then somebody from the council, yourself and Chip, to figure out, throw these 4 things at them and tell them what we're looking for, and then bring it back to everybody and see what costs are.
Yeah.
And then that covers what, and if Matt, if you want to have Matt on that, that's fine too.
Yeah.
I want to add that the state is really pushing this. So a lot of other communities are having the same conversation. So if we don't do something, we'll be falling behind.
Yeah, and there is one right outside of Dexter, which I saw, I think an ethanol plant was supposed to go there at one point. That's why it was kind of and then that fell through. So I think then they took it and they made it a certified site to try to do something, but it's kind of in an odd spot.
If you go to the City of Van Meter's website, they've got one on their website.
Yes, they
It was
do.
one of their finalists for Facebook or Google. I mean, it's a good thing. It's just, I mean, our geography, right, for the utilities is gonna be limited.
Could you just kind of explain, so maybe people what does it do for the town to have that certified?
Real quick, because we're.
I know, well, go ahead, Matt. I mean, it puts you in contention for all of these companies, because you're put on a website. And so like if Amazon or whoever wants to build in Iowa and they say, okay, we want a certified site, they can go to a website and they can see 10 towns have certified sites. So that way when they come, they don't have to do all this extra stuff. It's done, the studies are done. We don't have complaints from people like Mr. Poole with bald eagles and deers and things of that sort. So, I mean, all that stuff is done, ready to go.
So it's the IEDA's website. Right now there's 20 companies, or 20 sites in Iowa. So if you go there, you can see.
My phone.
It just makes it so that shovel ready, site ready, that people can come in right away and start.
Yeah, I just want to add that businesses, they go to the state, Iowa Economic Development Authority. They're gonna go there. They wanna make a decision within 3 days. So if they get an idea, they get their committee formed, hey, see what Iowa has, they contact IEDA, and then they're going to analyze what's available, and they'll generally make these decisions within a few days. So, sorry about this.
It's a good thing, I think we should
Corey,
possibly move forward, at some point and get some people.
so we can continue on.
I got it, if everybody's done with this, I got a couple questions. Were the utilities asked to move the electric pole to the new sidewalk, where they poured the sidewalk?
Subject.
Right. The engineer said he asked, near the sale barn, they poured
Oh, well,
the
they
sidewalk.
tore around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't move that pole because it actually supports other wire.
You couldn't have said
Everything
a
going-
temporary one?
What's that?
You couldn't have put a temporary one and taken that out?
Couldn't we have?
Where are you gonna put a temporary one, dude?
Right behind you.
That's private property.
Why did we?
Yeah, this isn't on the agenda, and this is
Why are we
not appropriate
changing
timing.
the subject?
I think this is the conversation you and Pat probably.
Okay, utility board is adjourned. Take 5
We're
minutes.
gonna take 5 minutes there.
No,